Hi there. Yes, this is number three, which of my videos on what should be done as a result of this election, um, made for the education of candidates, um, and if you want to take me off the bench, um, I'm willing to staff or run. You but the running's not in the cards because they're not letting people run on the internet for free anymore. That was never a good idea in the first place because people like me say, okay, I'll do it. Here are my ideas. And they say, oh, God, we don't want that. So, but yeah, I'm repeating myself. So, what would I do about government organization? Um, that seems to be the topic of the town this week in the Supreme Court. Um, I think agencies should be able to make regulations, and I think Congress should call themselves a regulatory agency when amending those regulations. Not by saying this is a law, but by saying, okay, this is a regulation, and when you amend it, and when we amend it, we're amending the regulation. We're not changing the law unless they can get the consensus to do that. So, yeah. It's a reasonable thing to do. I ran it by Neil Kerwin. Was an expert in regulatory policy and used to be the dean. The building where I had him for class is now named after him, Kerwin Hall. So, it's an approach that he thinks could work. So, not that the administrative state's not going away. And today, the Supreme Court said you can't just shut us all out as far as the court is going. They didn't defang government. They just said, no, we're going to be able to talk about more appeals than we can now. Yeah, it's a good idea. So, but yeah, and when they're doing authorization legislation as part of the appropriations process, they should talk about that. Talk about regulations. So let me do a real review of what regulations have been enacted. Where should they be going with that agenda? Put it in the record at least, a minority record, just anything, and that would help the process along. But the big thing is we need more regions. There should be regional vice presidents, and each region, then regional government should spend the money. The roads, the water projects, the bases, the military units that are assigned for coast and continental defense. The Coast Guard, the North American Command, where we have fighters ready that both rehearse and go around and make sure airplanes aren't being crashed into buildings. I'm sad to say that's actually a thing that they had to train for. So have to train for. So yeah, but that should be paid for with local taxes, with a local government and local generals and local regions and a local value-added tax. So and local. I'll talk about the taxing in video 2, or I have talked about it in video 2. You call this one 3. So regional government, less departments in the federal sector. There should be a Department of Science, which has NASA, and pollution and research. Number 4 will be about warming, because that's a whole other thing that needs to be discussed. If you follow my stuff, you know that I've already discussed it, but it's always good to make another video to restate what's going through this noggin. So yeah, because it's what you've done for me lately that's important. So yeah, it's NASA and transportation and disaster investigation, that should all be in science. Civil rights and justice should be together. Not the larger government federal government shouldn't be doing prosecutions. That should be a regional thing. But pardons should be national. And civil rights enforcement should be national. Labor rights enforcement should be national, because we do it in states now. It's gone horribly. So it needs to be nationalized, not even regionalized, but totally nationalized, with a core of highly educated, well-paid, and willing to like levy lawsuits and fines on polluters and slavers. There's no other better way to say it, is that people, we bring in immigrants and prisoners and homeless and have them make us breakfasts for less money than they would be getting if they were recognized as full workers and unionized. Unionization is something the national government should work on too, and be well funded. So yeah, and fees and fines can. The level of government I'm talking about can be done with fees and fines. It isn't even, in seigniorage, the Federal Reserve and Treasury operations can fund a Treasury and Commerce Department, which main job is, Treasury, collecting some taxes, but maybe not. Public debt can collect some taxes, but again, I'll talk about that one later. And selling data. The census should be a national thing, and and it should do all of the economics. Put them all together, all the surveys, and from labor and CEA and census, and one big happy data source. So and that's government reorganization, and the national defense operation should be intelligence and overseas deployments. And all the strategic nuclear stuff, that should be a national force, with all the other defense spending being regional. And all the product commands, their product commands are the people who deploy the airplanes, the ships, the missiles. Those should be paid for by the using command indirectly. So whether it's local or international, it's one thing. Trump was correct, and people should pay their way, but that should be through a worldwide asset value added tax, or at least an agreed upon one, or at least an allied national value added or asset value added tax. But again, I'm talking about that in another video. But yeah, if we're deploying someplace, then their bases need to be paid for by their people, and the pay of deployed airmen and soldiers and sailors, taken care of where they're based. So, except the strategic nuclear, that should be nationalized too, or kept and funded by asset value added tax. So, yeah, that's the government organization, reorganization, in pretty much a nutshell. 5 departments, 6 if you count state, 3 local, or 3 domestic, 3 national, plus a lot of regional vice presidents that would, meet with the vice president, and who would be determined locally. So, let's say I'm the blue party candidate, and win the presidency. I would if I won regions 3, 4, and 16, or whatever, however you want to number them. I do have a map. Regions with similar electoral vote numbers, like 67 or something like that, or 76, depending upon, or 96, depending upon how many regions you have. Should have equal electoral vote strength, and whoever the party that's dominant in the presidential election in that area, whoever gets those votes should select the regional vice president. It shouldn't be just the winner picks an occupying regional vice president. So, and then regional vice presidents would be the candidates for president, essentially. So that would be a very good solution, I think, and in a region, and them and then regional representatives on some kind of national caucus, select a president, and we would never get another Donald Trump again. That's a good thing. So, I mean, the founders saw Trump in the distance and says, no, we want an electoral college, and we forgot why. Donald Trump is the reason why an electoral college is a good idea. We just need to make sure it has its own independent life and not part of the legislature, or not exclusively the legislature. So, because we don't want a parliament either. Because if you have a parliament, you don't need a president. You have a speaker of the House that's your president. So, or the majority leader, and you don't need a Senate either. But we don't have that. We found that this what we do is better, and regions would make it even better. So the actual functioning of the national government would be international affairs and certain national things. So that is government reform in a nutshell. Nobody talks about that. Jimmy Carter talked about that, and it was one of those things that he ran on and convinced people that was a good idea, and nothing happened with it except the Department of Energy and Education. So I guess something happened with it, but it was creating new departments, not reorganizing other departments and making it all make sense. So because Congress. So any national organization needs to actually have a congressional committee reorganization as well. Whether you do big regional upsets or just moving agencies around between departments and combining departments, it's all you got to do congressional and executive at the same time, and bring everybody in. I studied this stuff in grad school. I know how to do it, and how not to do it. The way Carter did it wasn't the way to do it. So you got to co-opt people and give them a reason to want the new structure. So this is probably over most people's heads, but if you're a public administration nerd, you probably followed everything I've been saying. I've got books about it, so look at my books on reorganization, and it talks about it in great detail, more than a simple YouTube video can talk about. I will even provide a link in the chat, in the description. So, so that's government organization, because somebody's got to talk, even if they're babbling about real issues and real proposals. Instead of real resumes. So that was number 3. So I've got number 2 and number 4 to do. So stay tuned, shall we?